Hello, and welcome to a very special 8-minute demo video series. Today, we're going through a video tutorial on OIS 6.3 Advanced Workflow Design and Best Practice Video Shorts. Yep, these are going to be smaller videos on specific topics. And the topic we're going to talk about right now is naming convention and versioning policies. Let's take a look at the best practices for naming conventions and versioning for policies, and folders for that matter. So I've already set up a hierarchy of folders here. You can see as you've been watching these, I've been building more and more, but I have a specific folder here called naming convention and versioning, and within this folder I'm simulating a bunch of policies and folders that relate to each other for a specific process. Now your process would vary. You could do whatever you want. This is just an example. And of course I did mimic that same exact structure down here in the variables, and I would do so for counters and schedules if I needed more information on that in the global settings best practice. But for now, to save some room on the screen, I'm going to minimize that. We're just going to take a look at what I've set up here. So in general, my best practice for naming conventions of folders is I number and name each of the folders because it's an alphanumeric sorting system. And then I use standard 0.0, 0.1, 1.0, 1.0.1. So I use that standard numbering convention for folders and subfolders. Whatever you do, be consistent. That's probably the most important rule. If you're going to use a numbering and naming scheme like I have set up here, then you want to be consistent and you want to implement it consistently throughout all the workflows in the folders that you're going to be using. So enough on folders, let's take a look at some of the policies. So in this 0.0 main folder, I have a 0.0.0 main schedule process trigger. And you can see this is just to trigger the entire thing off, and it would trigger this policy. This is a main policy that calls the different stages within this entire process to include a cleanup and a notifications stage. When we initiate this guy here, he'll pass in a value for what stage to start, and obviously because we want to start at the beginning, we're starting stage 1, and then we would trigger stage 1, which would be down here, and we initiate stage 1, we do some subroutine tasks, and then we call back the main process, increasing the stage to 2, so when we come back into the main, we go down the stage 2 path, which in turn goes to stage 2, and then this one is a little bit more complex, where we have some subroutines we're triggering, and then we're going to trigger a step 2 within this stage 2, which triggers a subroutine, which then, after that's complete, triggers a step 3, and then step 3 triggers a subroutine, and then finally gets us back to the main process. If we take a look at that, we're going to stage 3. So we go up to main, we'd come in here as stage 3, and you can see that I've identified the link to only move forward on stage 3. Each one of these is identified by the labels. That's another naming convention, is name and use colors as necessary. I don't have any color usage in here, but for error handling, as you've seen in the past, use colors. And then, most importantly, name the link so you know exactly what's going on. And you want to name the link something that relates to the include or exclude statements that you may have used. Once we trigger stage 3, it goes down to here. So for this use case, stage 3 triggers various subroutines, some twice, and then finally gets back to the main process. And if we take a look at that, it's triggering 99.1, which if we go back to the main, we'll go down this path. And of course, we'd go to the cleanup routine and then the notifications, just like we did, going one to the next in the chain as necessary. So you may have noticed something after each one of the policies, v the number, dot number. Well, that's the versioning of the policies, and some of them are different, like v1.3, v2.0, v3.4. These are to represent the versions of the policies that are existing in this implementation. So this is the first version of this policy. If I needed to make a change, I would make that change, and then I would change the version. And I'll do that for you here. I mean, it's pretty simple. So if I wanted to add a parameter here, I would have to rename and change it from 1.0 to 1.1. Then obviously I would need to update where this is triggering So I'd have to go back to the main, and now that is triggering, and I'd have to update this, and then I'd have to change the version here, and you can see how that works. The versioning is very important because with the versioning in the name, you can keep track of what version each policy is currently at, and you can make sure when you're promoting that everything stays straight, and then you can delete the older versions, keep the newer version. As far as versioning itself, once you export this set of policies, you're going to want to identify a naming schema for that as well. So we'll put it in a folder and we'll give it a name, and this is going to be naming convention and versioning v1.0 or whatever your naming convention is, and then you'll choose whether or not you want to keep the counter schedules, variables, and whatnot. We do have variables for this, no global configurations. Hit finish, and this is going to export that. Now you're going to want to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about this in the policy promotion video, but you're going to want to sanitize your workflows before you send them on. And we have a special video for sanitizing workflows that I'll reference in the blog post. Now that we have a released version of this export, we can use a standard change release process. You could attach this to a change ticket saying this is ready to be implemented in the test environment, and then when it's passed the test, it could go to production. You want to export policies with every change so you can roll back, because there is no automatic rollback. There's no undo button or anything like that. So your rollback is importing older versions in case you made a mistake between versions. So you got to keep that in mind. It's best if you use a repository, maybe TFS or SourceSafe or whatever your code repository is. You should never import or make changes to policies in production. You always should go through a change release process from dev to test to production. And of course, you should use a different and separate test environment where possible. So that's about it for naming convention and versioning. Again, this is tied very closely to the policy promotion tutorial as well as the sanitizing exports video, and I'll make references to both of those. So again, use your own discretion with your naming convention, but keep the best practices in mind so you can keep everything straight. We certainly appreciate you watching. Thank you.